In many markets around the world, we've been moving to more and more renewables. The UK is fairly typical. It's about half our electricity is coming from non-fossil fuel sources. And as we're doing this, what you find is that in one region of the country, it'll be windy or sunny, and in another region, it's not. And so where it's not sunny, we'll be using gas power stations here. Some countries might use coal. And trying to set the price for electricity when you've got this incredibly diverse cost base, wind and solar, high upfront costs, high capital costs, virtually zero marginal cost. Whereas with fossil fuel plants, you've got to pay for the fuel. So as we move into this system, what we're finding is that typically, if you're setting the price for a large market like the whole of the UK, based on traditionally the most expensive unit generated anywhere, it's largely being set by the fossil fuel price, even though half your power is coming from renewables. Now, many markets have fixed this by introducing some form of locational pricing. In the northeast of the US, you have nodal pricing with 12,000 nodes setting the price based on very precise supply and demand in each region. In Sweden, Norway, Denmark, it's been introduced, and indeed Texas uses it, Australia. All those markets are seeing energy costs on average falling because you can take advantage of renewables. Now in Europe, you've got the UK, you've got Germany, two huge markets that are struggling with the highest electricity costs in the OECD, crippling business, terrible for cost of living, bad for inflation. And so we need radical market reform. That's the way in which, as you build more renewables, you can get cheaper prices. And that's what Zonal's about.
But Greg, I guess the concern is that if this government isn't able to lower the price of energy, full stop, so that our bills are cheaper, then does it put the citizens against renewables? Because there's no real incentive there.
You couldn't be more right. Look, we did some polling in the UK. 43% of UK voters support net zero. Right. 21% are opposed. So twice as many are in favour. If energy bills go up, support collapses to 13%. So if you want to deliver net zero, if you want to deliver clean energy, you have to focus on bringing costs down. And I should say, look, the technology allows this. A unit of electricity generated from wind or solar, typically around the world, is increasing the cheapest unit of electricity. But until we reform the markets, which, by the way, isn't always good for incumbent companies, consumers are not going to see the benefits.
But is the government, is this high on the priority list of the government? Do they understand how important this is to do it also in a timely fashion?
Very often governments feel they have to choose between going forward on a clean energy programme or going backward to cut bills. But the reality is, with creative thinking, these technologies, with market reform, with brave action, you can do both. Now, that is on the mind of the government. But look, I started a company 8 or 9 years ago that's going to be very big by disrupting incumbents. And I can tell you they don't like it. Now, the market reforms that are required will disrupt incumbents, but without them, this mission will be in peril. But
do you think they'll be able to lower prices on bills, full stop? Will they manage?
Market reform in the UK can bring bills down by about $120 per household per year as a baseline, reducing our dependence on the price of gas. By the way, it will also reduce emissions by 18% because you won't need as many coal-fired power stations, gas power stations, to fill the gaps in the wind.
Debt on energy bills is at a record. Is this something that the government needs to tackle?
We've just been through a fossil fuel crisis globally, certainly in Europe. So a couple of years ago, the wholesale price of gas increased in the UK 15x. Similar in other European countries. We're going to be paying the price for that sometime to come.
Greg, there's a number of things. The UK may be building a lot of wind farms. Are they building too many? Is there a concern that actually the government has wrong policies or priorities when it comes to renewables?
Yeah, so the UK and indeed some other countries may well be building in the wrong places. So look, at the moment, our biggest offshore wind farm is paid to not generate 71% of the time it could be operating because it's, one end of the country, there's not enough grid capacity to carry the electricity around, so we pay it to turn off. And then we pay gas power stations to turn on. If we're going to build wind power and we're going to benefit from it, we need to build it in many locations, closer to where there's grid connections, closer to where there's population. All of these things will help. But we also need to build a bigger interconnected grid. Europe is beginning to join up because, for example, it's always windy somewhere. So if you've got enough interconnections, you can connect the places that are windy right now to the places that are not, and vice versa at other times. There's even very ambitious plans, like, we backed one to build an interconnector between the UK and Morocco, because it's always sunny there, right? So, in this world of clean electricity, we need to reconfigure the system, but we need to do it in the most cost-effective way possible. And that means taking the cheapest energy sources, wind and solar, and distributing them to where that's needed, but at the lowest cost.
So because the US has a bit of a backlash, I think we're kind of greenlash against renewables, again, is there a danger of mismatch of actually the UK going at it alone without the US and then feeling the consequences?
Well, so first of all, we live in a big world, right? And the increasing cheapness, affordability of renewables means that they are absolutely growing exponentially. China last year built 60% of all renewables in the world were built in China. Very rapidly, it's tackling, their famous growth in coal plants. It's beginning to reverse that tide. Now, if I look at the US, Texas, not a state known for being particularly,
green friendly.
Woke, yeah, right, is the one with, I think, the highest proportion of renewables because they're cheapest and you can build stuff there. And the free market capitalist case for renewable energy is stronger every day because these technologies keep getting cheaper. The cost of batteries has fallen 93% in the last 13 years. So grid-scale batteries that you need to help balance the renewable system are getting cheaper. Electric vehicles, despite some of the kind of stuff you'll see in the press, are now 25% sales in the UK, around 20% in Europe, and they're growing rapidly. Each one of those has got a battery that will hold enough power for a typical European house for the best part of a week. So this system is growing around us. If we try and resist it, it will just cost more. Look, I don't know about you, but if you're crossing a multi-lane highway, the worst place to stop is in between, right in the middle, right?
Yeah, you can't stop, full stop, just because it feels a bit tricky. Greg, when you look at AI and data centers, I mean, this is like the big challenge we're going forward, just because we need so much of the energy. Are small modular reactors right to power those?
I mean, they could be. At the moment, though, we're years away from the first ones coming online. We don't really know whether they're going to deliver. I hope they do. Yeah. But first of all, we saw with DeepSeek, which maybe uses 20 times less electricity than previous large language models. The opportunity to make AI much more energy efficient is huge. We don't know where that's going to go. So we definitely need more electricity for it, but it's far too early to call. And I think there's already, some of the projects that were kind of being built on the back of AI demand, are being held for a bit. I think the second thing about, the sort of AI world is we don't yet know whether they can use energy more flexibly. Right. You can locate a large language model, a sort of an AI learning data center pretty much anywhere. So in the US, you're seeing them being built in the areas with the most abundant cheap electricity, by the way, which is typically renewable.